Sometimes you have to ask yourself whether for the next stage of the journey, you're the right person to be leading.
That too.
And that self-awareness is very important for founders to have. That's one. What you're saying is absolutely correct. After we hit 100, going towards 330 to 500, that journey is a different journey.
Yeah.
Right. And some of your talent that was great when you were 0 to 10 and really great may not be so great when it comes to this, because now you're no longer 20 people in a room debating stuff and answering stuff. Now you have to lead by process, through systems, building for scale and all of this stuff, which is a different approach, a different mindset, which also as a founder, you have to reset between your years.
Super
it all starts there.
Welcome to X Unicorns, a podcast brought to you by Blume Ventures. Blume is one of India's premier homegrown early-stage venture capital funds. If you're asking yourself what in the world is an X-Unicorn, rewind to episode 1 where we share the origins of the term X-Unicorns. We promise it'll be worth your time. In this series of conversations, we want to look back and celebrate founders and startups that have entered and are soon entering the X-Unicorn Club. Stories of founders that have played it by their rules and taken unconventional or even long drawn-out paths to get there. In today's episode, we have Ashwin Damera, Executive Director of Emeritus Institute of Management, in conversation with Karthik Reddy, co-founder and managing partner at Blume Ventures.
It's a lovely Thursday afternoon here at Blume Ventures, and we have an unexpected guest visiting us. Welcome, Ashwin. We have Ashwin Damera, the CEO and founder of Eruditus, and pleasantly discovered that we have a lot of commonalities in where we grew up and our origins. Ashwin, would you love to share what your childhood in Chennai felt like? I have very fond memories of my first 17 years there, but it's great to see somebody who grew up in Chennai, made Bombay their home, much like me, and is thriving here with a world-class company like Eruditus.
Thanks, Karthik. Thanks for having me. We have more similarities, I suppose. We also have Telugu as a mother tongue. And Tamil as a language we profess to speak, but others may be a more critical judge of that. Well, I grew up in Chennai, 23 years. I think the most memorable part of that is my schooling. I went to the Krishnamurti Foundation School called The School, which at that time was at this 13-acre Theosophical Society campus. And really kind of learned in open settings with nature, under the trees. Till the 8th grade, we had no exams, there was no uniform, all of that. And looking back, maybe that in some ways sowed the seed of the respect and love for education and what it can do to shape people's lives. But Chennai was a fun time. My parents and my brother's family, etc., still live there. Extended family still live there. But now Mumbai is my home.
It's fantastic to hear. So what I didn't realize is we're even closer than we thought. The compound wall of the Krishnamurti Foundation School is shared with a school called Shishya, which is where I spent 14 years straight, by the way.
Oh, nice.
So I'm a Shishya boy. So it's awesome to hear. A lot of Chennai stories maybe after we're done with this podcast that we can share. So I think maybe if you'd asked me to guess, knowing you now over 2 long conversations, I might have guessed you're a KFI boy. So that's fantastic. By the way, coincidentally, a little bit more of trivia, and I don't know how much of a connection there was, but I was reading this article, Obituary in the Hindu, last week. Gopal Srinivasan's mom passed away, and I didn't know she had a big role to play in setting up KFI. And there was another sort of fresh discovery I had. Seems like a wonderful woman, and met many KFI students after they've graduated. We didn't mingle much when we were in school, but met them through various parts of my life, and each one of them feels like they've taken away something wonderful from that experience.
And it's a small world because I believe her granddaughter was my classmate and also in my carpool.
Oh, wow.
And if I'm not mistaken, she used to live in Boat Club Road. I've actually been to that house. It's a magnificent house as well. But yes, she had a lot of institutional building, including helping.
I've had coffee with Gopal in that house, thereabouts. And I think Gopal would love to hear what his mother started as created products like you, who were out there sort of championing a new form of a new age of entrepreneurship. So coming to entrepreneurship, because I think it's been one of the driving forces around what keeps us going at Blume. So yes, there's valuations and LPs and GPs and all these fancy terms, but fundamentally I was reminded of it yesterday when 2 of my entrepreneurs, one who's an alum and one who's a live entrepreneur in the fund, meaning he's still building away. They actually met independently in Bangalore and both wrote into me. And they said, oh, we were having fond discussions of how we think of you as someone who wants to shape the right form of entrepreneurship in India. It was a very touching moment for me to be seen that way by my founders. If you look at the idea of this podcast, it's built around that more than whether you're a unicorn or you're going to become one. And these are all nice Western terms that we've borrowed, but essentially there is a innate sense of entrepreneurship that Indians have always had. And I think we're redrawing that in new era with new industries and new opportunities. What did it mean to you, and why would you choose that coming out of, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in Chennai, but you tend to find, most people think boys coming from Chennai are super conservative, happy to be in a job, happy to go abroad, migrate overseas, not come back to motherland. What does that journey feel like? So I'd love to hear what drove you in that direction.
Yeah, look, I think there are many stereotypes, Karthik. I think the South has a lot of entrepreneurship and business acumen for many years.
Yeah.
In fact, if you think about very recently, I haven't yet watched it, but Punniyin Selvan, the movie, it talks about the Cholas trading through the Straits of Malacca with Indonesia all the way up to China. And so they were enterprising entrepreneurial traders way back, I think, in the 5th, 6th, 7th century, etc. But the more modern way of entrepreneurship, where you start a company, you raise venture capital money, you build scale, exit, become unicorn, decacorn, all of that, that may be the new definition of entrepreneurship, which I'm not sure I fully agree with. Look, my journey in that path started by accident. I don't come from a family of business, and you're right. My brother, super intelligent, way more intelligent than me, is a PhD at UT Austin, then went to Stanford, worked at HP Research Lab, now heads up their AI and machine learning stuff, and he's written papers, has patents, and I can't understand any of that. And so when I kind of finished my business school as a kind of a field study to get a credit, I had written a business plan for this company called Travel Guru. It was a part of my curriculum. You were allowed to do practical work, so this was a field study. And I also joined the business plan contest at Harvard Business School. And surprisingly, we made it to the final. It was a surprise. And even more surprising, 2 of my classmates came and said, look, we'll give you $100,000. Go back to India and start this.
Oh, wow.
And I had a student loan, a sizable student loan. I had an offer with McKinsey to work in New York City, which was a lovely place to be.
Yeah.
And I had this dilemma. Do I come back to India and start this? And there were 2 people who were actually backing me. That would not have lasted a very long time, but at least it was a start. And yet I don't come from this background that has role models who are entrepreneurs. And in fact, my parents were worried. They were actively saying, hey, why don't you take that McKinsey job, work for 3 to 5 years, and then come back and start anything you want.
Classic.
Right? And I was like, but this idea at this time is not going to exist.
That's right.
If I come back again. So that was I think an entrepreneur's life, and maybe this is true of many people's life, it comes down to those moments where you have to make those pivotal decisions. I would not be sitting here if I decided to have taken that McKinsey job in New York, and maybe I would do well somewhere else, but I wouldn't be here.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
And so I decided to come back and came back to Mumbai, staying in a really small apartment, using the public transport. We would have run out of cash in 6 months, but you can't tell that to your early employees. We had about 20 people. It was a tough ride. So it was accident. It's kind of like entrepreneurship. I had this dilemma and I said, look, this is interesting. I'll come back. The one piece of advice actually I got was from the McKinsey partner when I said, hey, I want to go do this. So surprisingly, he was actually encouraging me. He said, look, go do this for a year. If it works, fantastic. You would have found your passion in entrepreneurship, and maybe we'll come and consult for you. If it doesn't work, even better, you'll be a very good consultant. Right? And if you actually think about it, then what he said simplified. What's the risk I was taking? I was going to get a year
of your life.
Of my life to learn at a pace that I think on entrepreneurship, the pace of learning there is so high that it's great.
Correct.
So it actually wasn't a very difficult decision, but then we have all these stigmas in our head. Oh, if it fails, what will people think? And blah, 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 blah.
Correct.
That was my entrepreneurial journey. And look, if you ask me today, can I imagine myself doing anything else? Absolutely not.
I'll come back to that thought, but it's interesting you said what you said. It sparked off another thing in me. So did you end up spending 3 years in the US? That's it? Or
No,
more?
I did my MBA for 2 years.
And came right back?
I came right back. In between, I took the bonus check also, signing bonus check from McKinsey.
Okay.
Cashed it to start Travel Guru. And then, of course, a year later, when I wasn't going back, I returned it.
Okay, very interesting. So even that happened. I spent about 7 years there. I have deep appreciation for some things, the way they work in that country. Clearly, that's why it's the mothership of capitalism. And one of them is their ability to sort of push these boundaries in children as early as arguably ninth grade, 10th grade, making them do summer jobs in service industries. Of course, Singapore does military conscription, but like various experiences of this nature. I think, I mean, we might be guilty as parents. I don't know about you, but I feel sometimes with my 14-year-old, are we too guarded in the way we teach our children and give them exposure and experiences to be more ready for these kind of journeys of decision making of the nature that you made, and being prepared to take those opportunities rather than be very cushy and very guarded in the way they work. And I feel like especially the US offers this opportunity a lot, and they celebrate the idea of experience, failure, venture, which we seem to be afraid of and worried about, and for good reason, because somebody will ask you in a job interview, what were you wasting time for, and how come you didn't follow the path I did? So I don't know if that's woven into your Eruditus story as well as you go on. Maybe they all add up at some point, but any views on that? And how do you think, whoever is listening in thinks about shaping your mind to be ready for entrepreneurship? That's where I'm coming from. I went through all the questions that your parents threw at you when I started Bloom, and that was much later, at 37, 38. So how do you contend with that, or how do you train your kids to think about?
So to put in context, our parents and the questions we went through, Karthik, were probably 15, 20 years back.
Yeah.
India has changed a lot. The entrepreneurial ecosystem has changed a lot. 5-10 years back, when we wanted to hire people and say, look, you'll get a lower salary, but you'll get ESOPs, they weren't excited. Now we actually have people who are saying, hey, I want more ESOP and I'm happy to trade off salary. So the ecosystem has changed. But you're right. The biggest hurdle, I think, is this fear of failure. I mean, how many times have I had people reach out saying, hey, can you give me advice? I have a full-time job. I have this great idea. I want to start it, but on a part-time basis.
Yeah.
And why can't you jump into it fully? Oh, no. I just want to make sure that till it takes off, I don't want to get in there. This fear of failure holds us back. And sometimes I feel that we should define failure as the failure to not even try.
Yeah.
Right? And that is real failure. In fact, the most successful entrepreneurs are there because they made that leap of faith and they tried.
Yeah.
Right? And if you've not even done that, you already failed.
Yeah.
Secondly, define failure as just learning. Right? My first startup, from every outward optical kind of measure, right? It was a small outcome. We raised capital. We barely managed to return the capital to our investors after 5-7 years. So you can define that as failure, and you wouldn't be wrong if you did.
Sure.
But for me, that was fantastic learning.
Amazing.
And my second startup is, I think, where it is today, which again, in the external definitions of unicorn, valuation, all of that probably far surpass even our own expectations. But I attribute a lot of that to that first learning, right? The 5-7 years spent in travel, Gurubai, we went through the ups and downs. In fact, as we speak and we're going through this downtown, I've seen 2008. We had nearly signed an agreement with Expedia to buy as Lehman Brothers collapsed, and we know what the world was after. We've lived through that. So if we have to make decisions today, you have that experience.
Correct.
A famous Stanford professor said this. He said, look, if I have a chance to invest between a really bright, smart person starting out the first time and so-called average failed entrepreneur, but starting his or her second business, 10 out of 10 times I'll invest in the second time entrepreneur. Why? Because they have the knowledge of failure, right? And actually, maybe it's better to say the wisdom of failure.
Yeah.
And that's my view of that. But that thing as a society has to change. If you look at the US, they have all of these things that soak up failure. Like they celebrate the fact that it's your second time startup. In fact, somebody in the VC world in the US says, oh, you have an opportunity cost of continuing to run your startup.
That's right.
You can go to insolvency if you're a big guy, nobody cares. You can sell debt. So if your company is not doing well, people are there to buy kind of low-grade debt, etc. Right? So the whole ecosystem is built there. But main thing, it's a mindset change. Nobody there says, oh, your startup failed, so I won't hire you. Right? Here, this big fear still exists.
Correct.
So I think a lot of this and what you're trying to do with this podcast is change these mindsets.
Yeah.
And the truth already, I feel, is that, look, there is no such thing as a failed entrepreneur. But there are people who kind of fail to take the entrepreneurship journey. I think those people, in my mind, at least, I would say,
are bigger failures.
If you hold a mirror to them, maybe they're bigger failures.
I think having lived through a decade plus of this wonderful journey called entrepreneurship, I think it's very well said. And I share the views, obviously, because I'm going through a similar path myself. People continue to wonder whether we will be quote unquote successful, but the journey is far, far more enriching. And if you hadn't put in those first 5-7 years of sacrifice, there's no way it would look like a win, really. It would look like a job. I mean, you could have gone and taken a job at a big VC. It'll feel the same as how you described that failure to actually take that chance yourself, and it was given. And I think in that sense, if you look at both our relative educational backgrounds, it's also, I feel that at one level, a tragedy that the most privileged don't take these chances, right? I mean, you have a lot more underdogs taking these chances. We don't see too many of our peers taking these much tougher chances. But they're more equipped from networks, ability to access capital, people, and we should be taking more of this to spur the country forward, not applying ourselves into necessarily one job or the other. So how did the travel guru journey eventually morph itself into an Eruditus journey? And walk us through how difficult or easy or challenging that was.
So Travel Guru started straight after finished my MBA at Harvard Business School, 2005. Ran it till 2008. We raised a Series A, I think Westbridge, that later on became Sequoia, and then Battery Ventures invested. In 2008, we signed a term sheet that Expedia would buy us. This would have been at a 75 million odd valuation, which would have been great. Everybody was very excited. We negotiated terms, et cetera. Should have known better. Would have signed that faster, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then Lehman Brothers collapsed in August, and obviously so, the deal fell apart. But the problem is we had only 2 months of cash in the bank because we were selling the company. Why would you raise money and dilute? And why would a new investor coming in knowing that you were selling?
Correct.
Right? And that's when, you can say shit hit the roof. But, these moments, like I said, I can break up my life into these pivotal moments. What I learned in those next 6 months surpassed what I learned in the first 5 years. When everything goes well, right, you just go with the flow, you're so excited. But when everything is really not working is when you learn a lot about business and yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And sometimes who your friends are also.
Yeah.
But the point is that what I realized also, Karthik, is look, I was in the travel space. This was a business. And my real motivation was I wanted to start up.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it big.
Yeah.
Was I completely passionate about travel? Perhaps not, right? And so when I was thinking, so eventually we sold to Travelocity in 2009, much lower outcome, 1/5 of what Expedia did, but the investors got their money back and we decided to move on. And then I said, look, if I'm doing something for the next 10 years, I can't predict the outcome. It can be high yesterday, low tomorrow.
Correct.
So then how do you make sure that you stay sane? How do you make sure that you spend 10 years of your life doing something when the outcome is unpredictable? So then kind of this moment of epiphany came where I said, look, I want to be doing something that even if 10 years go by and I get 0 out of it, I know that I did something I loved. And to me, this idea of service, of helping others, etc., has always been there. Again, may go back to my early childhood, environments, values. See, one thing I'll say, while we may not be as, say, entrepreneurial or free-spirited as the West, the value systems here, culturally, I feel, in India, are very, very deep. Correct. So this thing of giving back, right, was always ingrained in me. So the idea of either education or healthcare was something that I was pursuing. I had 1 year at Travelocity where I kind of was transitioning the business to their ownership. And education, I think I had benefited personally. Like you rightly said, right? I think you went to Wharton, I went to Harvard Business School. I mean, these are opportunities that so few get. And even if you get, how many can afford and so on and so forth. I felt, look, if I could amplify the benefit of that education to more people, then in some way my life was well served. And at the end of that 10 years, who knows what that business outcome is. But I would have felt happy working on that mission. So that was the idea. And when you decide to do something good, I think the whole world conspires to make it happen. I am a fairly spiritual person, but in layman's terms also you can think of
Correct.
it. So as I was talking about people, about education, healthcare, my head of marketing connected me to my co-founder Chaitanya, who had come back from France. He went to INSEAD, did his MBA, also worked there in executive education. So he's the education guy, the purist.
Okay.
And then we met and we said, hey, what can we do together? And he was delivering these very high quality programs, 30, 40 people at a time. And I was like, Chaitanya, this needs to be 300,000, 3 million people. How do we scale this? And that led eventually to forming Eruditus and our journey here. But the key takeaway, at least what I learned, I mean, I learned a bunch of stuff in Travel Guru, right? I mean, we can talk about that and spend hours. But it was, as any entrepreneur, find a problem that you care about deeply,
Yeah,
right?
agree with you. Couldn't
And
agree
then spend your life trying to solve it.
Yeah.
Money will come, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you want to make money and then you search for a problem that you think will solve, but the goal is to make money, your likelihood of actual success is far lower. This was my learning from my 2 startups. Honestly, sometimes I reflect, Karthik, I work less hard today at Eruditus than I did at Travel Guru.
Yeah.
But the zeal, the mission, the passion, all of that is there, that somehow this startup has found its stride and has done way better than we could even imagine.
Correct.
Right? And the last thing I'll say is I can see myself doing this for the next 10 years as well. Right? I'm not tired to come to office, even if it's a virtual office on a Monday morning, right? Because I love what I do and it's doing well.
It sounds cliched, but can't be more true than how you expressed it. And I keep telling my peers, my colleagues to over-index on this deep love for the problem that the founder wants to solve. You don't get it all the time, I think, because sometimes founders are discovering themselves and not just the problem. But where they are, I mean, we've seen our most outrageous outcomes in terms of success, however you measure it. And it could be as simple as what you said, the joy of just building and building and building something that becomes memorable and it affects enough customers' lives. That happens only when that match is there. And we've seen founders walk away from their other startups because they couldn't relate to where that love journey might be 5 years from now. So if they got an opportunity to get a great M&A, it didn't even have to be distressed. Sometimes it was a nice, decent, mid-sized M&A. More than happy to take it because they wanted to reset their lives.
And it's an important point for your listeners as well. A lot of people will look at the unicorns and all of that, which makes a lot of headlines, and say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to be a unicorn. I want to create wealth for myself.
Yeah.
What most people don't realize is wealth is a byproduct of something. It's not the goal.
I agree.
It's a byproduct, right? So you really, if that is your reason to be an entrepreneur, the second reason a lot of people say, oh, I can be in control of my time. How wrong they are. But these are all wrong reasons to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Be an entrepreneur because you care passionately to solve a problem that you believe somebody else has not already solved. If somebody else has already solved it, don't waste your time. And then whether you're in control of your time, you make a lot of money, whatever, you would find happiness.
Yeah.
And ultimately that is the goal of life, happiness and fulfillment, right? And I think the chances are 9 out of 10 times you'll also find the other byproducts that you want.
No, absolutely. No, so this used to scare my LPs in my first 4 or 5 years of pitching. So they used to ask me questions around portfolio construction and things around the money manager aspect of my job. And I used to tell them, scarily enough, you should never say this to LPs, but maybe some of them will listen to this podcast, some won't. But I used to actually tell them that I come to work for the love of working with founders, being able to advise them, being on the journey. The money management piece is a byproduct. So that would freak them out because in financial services, nobody says the core aspect of money is not your core business. And I can't skirt that today, right? Because if you want to build an organization, you want to build aspirations for other people who want to follow in my footsteps and manage companies, you need capital. There's no running away from that. But I see it as fuel and raw material to actually live out our dream of actually working with a lot of founders on a very close basis in the early parts of their journey. And it explains why after 12 years, we don't do anything but just that. Right? So people have asked us, why didn't you go to Singapore? Why didn't you do Series A and B? And I said, for what? We're like entirely engrossed in what we do. We have more than we can handle, right? We're doing it because we think we can shape what we can on the shores of this country. I'm not interested in any other problem unless it's for the money. And it's not. That is a function of how you're feeding raw material to fuel the same mission that started 10, 12 years ago. So totally in sync with you. I mean, it's not like we've exchanged a whole bunch of entrepreneurial notes, but I don't think could have had a more aligned construct of why we think of our entrepreneurial journeys the way we do. Eruditus. So the reason you're on if I may say so, you're on the podcast is you're either a unicorn or going to be a unicorn, because the title of the show is...
So ultimately, Karthik, these external
Validations, yeah.
matter.
Matter.
Otherwise, I won't be here.
That
I
is
can
true.
be the happiest person, most passionate about solving the world's problems, but I wouldn't be here.
Be very zen, but not on this podcast. No, jokes apart, I think we all have to celebrate the idea that we play into capitalism and its outcomes in a very positive way. And there's no running away from that. We hopefully change lives, improve lives, create wealth. And that trickle-down effect is also joyous to see. But more fundamentally, jokes apart, like the fact that today your unicorn is great. 3 years ago, you might not have been. It didn't matter that much. In fact, some of our guests in the series are not yet those unicorns. To us, we were trying to catch an entrepreneurial journey at a phase in their life of where they had built something substantial in terms of value. That was part A. Part B, as you might have seen from our blog and our narrative, was that these were very unconventional journeys. Nothing was storybook or formula as in terms of A, B, C, round 1, round 2, round 3, hot shot VC in every round. So there are enough of those journeys out of the 100 plus unicorns in the country. I would definitely not put you in that category. I would put you in the sort of outlier category of not getting noticed at all for years at end. And so coming off, however successful or unsuccessful Travel Guru was, it was an outcome which met its end state. And I think I have immense respect for founders who are able to deliver that, irrespective of the dollar value attached to it. So I would have thought, and I know second-time founders were not hot and sexy back then in 2014, 15, but I would have thought people would have been all over to say, hey, Ashwin, what are you starting next? Here's my check. I'm backing you. I know you're a rock star. Which is happening a lot now.
That's what even I thought.
What happened?
That was not the case.
What happened? Why didn't people believe what you were doing? Little bit about that would be great for founders to hear. I mean, firstly, nobody had heard of you till 3 years ago, I think, in the popular venture space, because you hadn't raised too much money. You were under the radar. And suddenly out of the blue, you're like one of the big boys in ed tech in India. So what happened? What are the gaps and missing in people's understanding of the journey?
Eruditus started in 2010.
Oh, as early as 10. Okay.
Correct. And we raised capital in 2017. Some of my learnings from Travel Guru were plowed back into Eruditus. So that we said, why can't we run profitably? Why do we have to raise external capital? Why don't we scale through just good unit metrics?
Sure.
In fact, one of my best professors at Harvard Business School, Professor Bill Solomon, he said, what is the best form of fundraising?
Yeah.
And then there's a pause. And he said, from customers.
Customer revenue, yeah.
But we are taught that it's from VC, ABC, this system, Y Combinator, EOP, all of that. But from customers. So that's what we did in Eruditus. Though I took the class, I forgot that in Travel Guru. But in Eruditus, we did that. But then there came a point when we went online. Then it was not possible for us to build the product. The courses required investment, the tech required investment. So we could not have continued to kind of bootstrap if we really wanted to scale. And that ambition was always there. Look, just because we didn't raise capital the first 7 years, nobody should misconstrue that we did not have the ambition to build something big. And many times people have said this to me. Right? So anyway, that ambition was there. So we said we had to raise capital and we said, okay, this is a good time. So I said, okay, look, now we built a profitable company. We've grown from 0 to I think 10 million. Second time entrepreneur, good education, all of this. So this should be fairly easy. But that is again one of the many assumptions and mistakes that we made. And then I got asked this very interesting question by a VC in Bangalore. He said, are you a promoter or an entrepreneur? I said, no, what is the difference? Now I know the difference apparently, but what is the difference? And in his mind, the fact that we were profitable and then we didn't raise a Series A within 6 months made me a promoter. Right? The fact that we had not diluted and we still owned all of the company, literally, means I'm a promoter. That means I didn't have the appetite and the hunger to grow. I was building a lifestyle business and so I was not investable. So he was one of the many who said no.
It happens even now, by the way. Yeah?
Really?
Yeah, 2022 happens all the time. Yeah, you'll be surprised how many times.
And this is the funny thing, right? When people say no, we take it very personally. It happens across the board. That's the other thing that you have. Yeah. So I developed thick skin. Yeah. And eventually I said, look, this is not working. Nobody's investing in us. So I was in New York talking to my friend. If you remember Travel Guru, 2 people had written me a check. So one of them I was talking to in New York who had set up a small $10 million fund, investing some of the secondary money that Indian startup founders had made, mostly HBS alumni, etc. So he said, okay, look, I can write you $1 million check. And we said, how do we figure out valuation? So in that meal, valuation happened.
Okay.
And $1 million came, and that became technically a Series A. This was Ved Capital.
Okay.
And we made that 1 million last because, again, remember, we had built this company with zero.
Yeah.
And then we went back to Bertelsmann, who had said no to us before.
Yeah.
We had launched our online product, shown traction, etc., and the rest of it happened. But entrepreneurship is always a story of many rejections and dejections.
Correct.
But like I've said before, it's also a story of to struggle, to strive, and to seek, and to never yield. Those are not my words. There's Alfred Lord Tennyson from Ulysses. But that's what it is, Karthik. No entrepreneurs become successful because the first person he met gave them money, or the first employee they wanted to hire joined, or the first customer they pitched was happy.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many doors shut. That's part of the process. Look, nothing unique about our journey. You accept it, you move it, and getting them to say yes, that's the key skill.
And this $1 million itself happened in 17? No, that happened a little earlier.
So $1 million happened in 2016, and then we raised an $8 million round in 2017 from Bertelsmann.
And so Bertelsmann was the lucky first investor. But tell me and it's very, very difficult for entrepreneurs, startup founders to understand this, but there are these simple heuristics which always are true, right? You have to pitch 50 people to get like one check. And people assume that, oh, you got X valuation, why couldn't you have gotten better? It's like, dude, there's one guy in the world who said yes, right? So what do you mean I can improve on this or I could have gotten a better valuation? So even the conviction process is so challenging. So what do you think tipped the favor finally into people believing that you're building something? And if you can, before that, just give a little bit of a glance on what did the business approximately look like back then? And what were you selling? So this is something that founders struggle to sell, the vision of what the business can become in a realistic fashion. Of course, you can throw out an Excel sheet there and say, oh, I'll become $1 billion business. But were you selling $1 billion business in 16, 17? Maybe not. And
No, we weren't. So we were about 10 million in bookings.
Okay.
And
this, just for the audience's understanding, when you say 10 million in bookings, it means courses sold in one capacity or the other.
Courses that start within our fiscal year for which we've collected the fees.
And what kind of courses back then?
So at that time, these were predominantly classroom courses. So maybe 3 weeks of teaching spread across 6 months. And we had just launched our first few online courses, which were typically 2-month online courses.
And all Ivy League grade at that point.
Yes. So when we met Bertelsmann the first time, we were a classroom business. And
Understood.
Pankaj had given us feedback, which was actually, very astute feedback, very valuable.
Yeah.
That's one more thing. When people say no, always ask them for the reasons.
Correct.
And they'll give many reasons. You pick and choose the one that make most sense for you.
That's
that's the most valuable thing.
Spot
In fact, many people, they diss VCs, but that's a mistake.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that VCs are smart people for many reasons, and maybe not for some reasons, but they see so many companies.
Yes.
So what they see that an entrepreneur doesn't see is they see the whole iceberg. We see the tip of the iceberg, and most likely it's below our nose because we live in our own sweet worlds.
Yeah.
So getting feedback was helpful. So Bertelsmann had invested globally in Udacity, in Reliance Learning, and a bunch of other education funds also.
Okay.
So Pankaj's feedback to us was, look, you're a very good offline business focused on India, but until you have online, you're not scalable, you're not investable. And the second feedback I'll give to entrepreneurs raising capital is, be in touch with your VCs or your investors over a period of time, because when they see the traction that you're making, they also get excited, right? So we took that feedback. We went to MIT, Columbia, and Dartmouth, other schools as well, but we got these three to come together and for the first time sign one contract, 3 schools, to create online courses with us.
Fantastic.
And then when we launched the first few courses, the traction was very good. And we suddenly realized, Karthik, we're getting students from Vietnam, we're getting students from Argentina, from Europe, and all parts of the world. So when we went back to Bertelsmann, right, we were now getting to be an online business and starting to say, hey, we could be a global business, not just India.
Correct.
I think our projections at that time said that, look, in the next 5 to 7 years, we'll do about maybe 50 million, 80 million in bookings, right? And this year we're projecting about 500 million approximately in bookings. So
Amazing.
did we even imagine how big we would
difficult
be?
to visualize.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, until you
I'm sure
actually
there was
see
some
it.
clause in our shareholder agreement at that time that said that, look, if we were selling anything below 500 million, we would need investor consent. So the bar that the investor had also was 500 million. Right? And I don't blame them. See, look, So much of what has happened
only
is
so much visualization somebody
you
can
can't take credit for all of this. This is just the journey. It has turned out to be better.
Yeah.
And you enjoy that, but you can't take any credit for this, right? So it has turned out to be way better than we did. But I'll come back to the Bertelsmann thing, is that the moment we had online and the global, they were, within 3 months, we got it done. Because
That's
Pankaj was like, wow, you guys have actually executed on what I gave you feedback on.
Yeah, conviction that founder takes good feedback, is able to visualize that big business and actually executed on it. And it opens up the door that this can be 10x the business size that was pitched a few months ago. And we keep telling pretty much the same advice. So thanks for echoing that.
And at that time, we were 10 million.
Yeah.
And then we went from 10 to 30 million to I think 65, something like that. Then to 90, 180, 330. We'll see this year 500. I remember when we had met vendors for the first time, they said, no, you guys are too small. We don't want your mandate.
Yeah,
now we are best friends. So, the journey has happened and it took us 7 years.
Yeah.
Like you rightly said, nobody had heard of us.
Yeah.
And that was because we didn't do any PR. When you're bootstrap, who has the money for PR and all of that, right? But we built a good product. And in our business, it's very important to understand how a university works. And when we went online, Karthik, it was not a trivial issue to figure out saying, hey, how do we take what you teach in the classroom and make it work online? And because of our classroom background, we never became a MOOC like Coursera or edX. We wanted live teaching. We wanted the student to see the faculty. We wanted group work. When somebody submits an assignment, they should get feedback. All of that came because we had spent 7 years in a classroom and we would literally sit in every single class. A, we loved it, but B, the business demanded to understand.
It's the only way to learn the business.
What's the pedagogy here? What parts of what the faculty is teaching is the student liking, etc. So I think what I mean is, look, you ultimately have to build a business with the nuts and bolts bottoms up. You have to understand your students. And if you're a two-sided platform, you have to understand both sides because both sides are customers in a sense. So we had done all of that hard work. So, 7 years to get to 10 million. But from 10 to 500 happened in 5 years.
Amazing.
And I always say this parallel, it's like flying a kite. For those who have tried it, maybe it gives away generation. But to get that kite to take off is very difficult. Many times it'll land and, sometimes get torn and then you're done, right? Yeah. But once it takes off and there's a decent breeze, you tie it up to a pole, it'll keep flying.
Correct.
It's not that easy, entrepreneurship, but it's kind of the analogy
Getting there. More power to you to tie it to a pole. So some of what you just said, I was looking at some of the stats, 70 university partners, 300 plus courses, 2,000 plus employees, 80% live now, completion rate of greater than 80%. So I'm articulating it for the listeners to say that everything that you've said in the last 20 minutes is essentially understanding both your customer on both sides, because at the end of the day, you're a marketplace, so well and getting PMF so well that you're actually able to see these stats. And that explains this kite taking off as well. So the follow-on question, interestingly, is how do you resist the temptation? Of course, you didn't have silly money to burn and chase growth. But even when you started getting the money, how did you know that you were not compromising PMF over growth? And getting this right every time with a new market, new customer, before you started pumping money into it and finding that actually is not a great strategy.
So look, we've got it right many times. We've also made our mistakes. The simple answer is MVPs, right? Try and do something small. If it works, then scale it. For example, when we tried to go to China, which was a new market for us, the first time we tried to do it with a JV with a local partner. And this person, bombed the course, but then registered the MIT trademark in China, registered the Eruditus Emeritus trademark in China, and we had to sue this person and spend 1 year. We won the case, blah, blah, blah. But, that was horrible product market fit. But we continued. It was one program, it was one experiment, and then we realized we need to have our own team, and we embarked on doing that. When we launched our first few online courses, Karthik, very interesting. We thought people will like what they liked in the classroom. So classroom, they like leadership program, management development program, strategy program. So when we went online, the entire portfolio was on those lines. It so happened that what people like online are very specific topics: digital marketing, right? Healthcare analytics, design thinking, etc., etc. So our first 8-9 courses actually didn't do so well. And then we had a few universities saying, oh, should I really be doing online with you? Luckily, we had 1 or 2 courses that did well. We learned, pivoted, and went on and so forth, right? So the ability to recognize patterns quickly, to start with experiments and then scale the things that work, I think is what has helped us. But look, everybody is going to have failures. When you try to launch new S-curves, some will fail. For those of the people who are interested in this, there's a lovely book. It's called The 3-Box Approach, where box 1 is managing your current business, managing the present. Box 3 is about creating the future, like taking these bets for these new S-curves. And box 2 is about forgetting the past. Like, in other words, challenging the assumptions. We had to challenge ourselves in 2016 that we were an India business, that we were a classroom business, right? And now if you're creating the future, for example, let's say we're creating courses. Today, 15% of our students are learning in languages other than English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin. Now, that was not something that we had before. So that started literally 2 to 3 years back, right? So that's a new S-curve. That's a box 3 for us. So we always have to be thinking, hey, what am I doing today that 5 years from now is a new S-curve? What am I doing today that some non-customer is going to become a customer 5 years from now? And it's like exercise. It's not exercising 5 years from now. It's exercising today so that you're fit 5 years from now. And so those experiments, how do you build that muscle of running those box 3 experiments? Many of those will require you to forget things, right? So that is the process. It's this creative destruction process that we as a company try to do. And look, I don't know whether we do it very well or not, whatever, we'll see.
You seem to be doing a great job, being too humble. But, that brings me to 2 points that we struggle with.
I think not being too humble. If I go back to the last 12 months after we raised a slightly large round, we've made some mistakes. So when I reflect, which I would know very well, right? It is, even though you're a second-time entrepreneur, even though you have all of this wisdom, it's sometimes easy to kind of forget and get carried away.
I think you're making 2 points. I'm only highlighting it because we've seen this with all our founder journeys as well. That one assumes that, and the biggest fatal flaw, if you ask me, because I enter almost always at seed to pre-A, is that the founder who's got that capital assumes that the rest of the journey is going to play out in the same fashion. And what they don't iterate for, some of the frameworks you gave are useful for how to not only think about business, but also about their personal development as they go through these journeys. And you would lean on very conveniently what you learned from 10 million to 50 million and realize that fails miserably when you try to hit like a scale button at 50 to 500 with the sometimes same people, same team dynamics, same structures. Organizationally, capital-wise, you can make so many mistakes,
Absolutely.
right? Absolutely. And it's so tough. I mean, that's why the journey is tough. And sometimes put it in the Indian context, we're all learning and people assume that, no, there's a rocket ship button that you can hit. And with capital that somehow scales. The reality is if that were true, then we would have multiple $10 billion plus companies all listed in this country showing quarterly numbers, and that predictability is not as easy to achieve.
And sometimes you have to ask yourself whether for the next stage of the journey, you're the right person to be leading.
That too.
And that self-awareness is very important for founders to have. That's one. What you're saying is absolutely correct. After we hit 100, going towards 330 to 500, that journey is a different journey.
Yeah.
Right? And some of your talent that was great when you were 0 to 10 and really great may not be so great when it comes to this, because now you're no longer 20 people in a room debating stuff and answering stuff. Now you have to lead by process, through systems, building for scale and all of this stuff, which is a different approach, a different mindset, which also as a founder, you have to reset between your years.
Super
it all starts there, right? But I think about that as a great learning.
It's
right?
evolution.
Because there's never a dull moment.
An individual evolution, which is what founders need to
And that's
aspire.
why, for example, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs who are very modest, self-reflective, not narcissist, etc. Though many times the entrepreneurs who may be celebrated in the media and in the world are those flamboyant ones. But in my mind, and again, I'm biased because I think I'm in this category, the people who are quieter but more self-reflective, who are asked themselves, hey, what am I unlearning? Not just learning. So look, I'm in the business of learning, but I actually think I'm in the business of unlearning as well. When we work with senior executives, you don't need to many times teach them anything new. You have to tell them to stop doing stuff first. Right? And that's true for an entrepreneur as well.
No, perfect. No, I think it's a great lesson and hope everybody picks that up. Not everybody is going to be a late stage founder, but I think there's some invaluable gems in what you expressed. In India, we wish there will be, wish for a lot more successful stories at a global level for Indian companies. And I would argue you're one of the few companies who's on that path, right? Even if, as you rightly said, achievement is just a milestone. I mean, you're continuing to build, you're continuing to learn. So we won't declare wins, we'll just declare the path to success for you. But even this scale is not something that too many companies have done. New age companies have done. We've sold services, we've sold products. I'm not saying we haven't. But from a new age perspective, what is the opportunity set that Eruditus managed to crack? And is that a set that's easy for other entrepreneurs to pursue? Meaning, you build in India with most of your back India, but build a global product which everyone can be proud of. And the subset of that isn't that crazily challenging, because you're not building for one market or even two, which I think we're fairly good at. Like, say, let's say do US cross-border SaaS. People are getting the playbook refined. You're selling to every country in the world. There is micro nuances in every country. Product and people differ geographically. And then along with that, I don't know how complex your team is globally. How do you run? I mean, it's bad enough trying to run a 40-person team across 3 cities at Bloom, but like, how do you manage global complexity of that nature, both in PMF, customer type, as well as building a team that can scale to that ambition?
See, many ways to answer this, but really, how complex is it? I'm running a 2,000 member team, 500 million bookings. If somebody can run Pepsi and Coke and Google and Amazon, we are so trivial. This is nothing. So why give yourself some great self-importance and say I'm running some big enterprise? Absolutely not. Right? People have done this before. People will do it again in the future. But the one skill set that I'll say that has worked for us is the ability to smell an opportunity and then to pursue it. Right? In other words, to populate S curves every now and then when we see it. Let me give you an example of LATAM or China. When we were offering our courses in English itself, we saw that we had about 15% of our students coming from Latin America for English courses. Then any entrepreneur will think that, hey, if I offered the courses in Spanish or Portuguese, then I could go deeper into that market. And so once you have that conviction, then the question is, how do I assemble the team? How do I build the product? Do I translate? Or do I dub? And these are decisions and choices, all of which, by the way, you can test, and you will make mistakes. We had to make leadership changes in our LATAM team. We had to redo a little bit of the tech, etc., right? But that is execution. I think the place where, if at all I can take some credit, it would be to say, okay, look, I was in India, we were in India business, but we had the ambition to say, hey, why can't we be a big business in Latin America or in China? Or why can't we build a very large B2B business, right? That ambition, outwardly be extremely ambitious, inwardly be very modest. If you can do this, then I think it doesn't matter. Look, our model is an Indian startup that went global. And the reason is we work with brands, MIT, Harvard, Wharton, Cambridge, etc., that are global brands. So when I switch on marketing in a country, say it's South America, Australia, Europe, Asia, these brands are well known. If I had to do that under the Eruditus and Emeritus brand, it would be challenging. So our answer is A. Some other startups' answer will be B, and there's C, D, all the way up to Z. Right? Yeah. But the point is that I believe that if you can keep thinking about new S curves, right? Versus my belief, versus being just one product and doing it well. There is a view, by the way, Karthik, as you know, is focus. So just do one product or service and do it like really well. But even if you do that, hey, what new segments, what new countries, what new languages? That's the box 3. And my view as every entrepreneur, you must spend 60% of your time on box 1. That is today, that keeps the lights on. If you don't get your product market fit, your unit economics, you're going to be out of business. Fundraising is also to some extent box 1 predominantly. But you have to spend 20-30% of your time on box 3, the future. Right? And the future also involves breaking down your existing assumptions. Right? And box 2, which is forgetting these things, right? Like, hey, forgetting I'm an offline business. Right? Forgetting that my courses are in English only. Why? That's an assumption. Why make that assumption? Right? Tomorrow we can think about a course where, say, somebody, like, for example, we have a university at one side. You can challenge that assumption. Why can't it be Google that's teaching data science, which already some people are doing, right? So you can challenge every single assumption. And when you do that, you can find new box 3 approaches. I think that was the key for our growth.
Fantastic. Great advice again for young founders. As we reach like the last phase of this hour we planned together today, would love to sort of think about where things are at currently. So I know it's a macroeconomic blip and it doesn't change the way you think about your business for 10 years. But as you said, without getting into specifics or details, which is not the point, what are the challenges of dealing with a situation like this after pretty much like a 14-year bull market run, right? So there's been a consistent sort of up and up in the venture market, though it might have been slow at times, fast at times. This kind of shock, I think, has been missing. More and more voices across Europe and the US trying to say that it's just autumn, it's not even winter yet. The worst is yet to come. And a lot of folks have stocked up for winter, so it's, including perhaps yourself, that's fine. But two things. Do you find this first sort of biggest downturn in perhaps in the way you systematically built this company, almost profitably through most of its journey? How do you deal with that shock at a personal level, at a company level? And then corollary to that, what advice for any stage of entrepreneur? If you say, look, I can't relate to what a 24-year-old is going through now, that's okay. You've been past that. But then there are late stage entrepreneurs also who are very much like you. So pick any class of entrepreneurs to whom you would give current day advice, and from this learning of this particular downturn and how you're reacting to it.
Yeah. So look, my advice, if I am in a position to give that, is simple to everybody. Look, if you have started to solve a large problem, just because the markets are in a free fall, your problem is still there. It still has to be solved.
Absolutely.
So from a mission perspective, not much has changed. One may argue that for us, for example, our mission is even more relevant today than maybe it was 10 years back, right? So first one is just remind yourself, why are you in this startup in the first place? That's why I say the people who find this last few months and the next few perhaps most challenging are those who thought they'll be an entrepreneur to make a lot of money. Because that has gone down 40-50% and may go down even more. But if you come here to say, look, my mission is to make high quality education accessible and affordable, well, how does it matter to that mission?
Absolutely.
What happens around you? So
Correct.
first and foremost, I think it really gives you a lot of courage if you can remind yourself of why you are doing what you're doing, number one. But there is the practical side as well. And there's only one advice, is never run out of cash.
Yes.
There's no startup that's successful that doesn't have cash in the bank.
That's right.
Right? So, and that every business will have to figure out what their burn is and what they can do, and the answers will vary. But broadly, yes, everybody's belief, and Karthik, you are in a better position to advise on this, is stock up on your cash, right?
Yeah.
Which can mean many things, right? How do I get more cash from my customers? How do I get cash up front? How do I delay payables? How do I raise more capital, whether it's equity, whether that's debt, indirect costs, all of that stuff. If you were not fortunate enough to raise a large round last year, that window has shut, but still there are ways open to raise cash and make sure that you have a leeway for the next 12 to 24 months. Right? So that's the second thing. Third thing, I just remind entrepreneurs who may be looking at a down round, flat round, whatever it is, and putting this, oh my God, if I do a down round, it's the end of the world for me because I will be judged so harshly, whatever. This is all illusion.
Maya,
right?
Correct.
So again, remind yourself, why have you started a startup? Remind yourself this is a 10-year journey. At the end of 10 years, where do I want to be? That has not changed.
Absolutely.
See, I've seen 2008 when the world melted down. We were worth 75 million one day. The next day, somebody said you're worth zero.
Yes.
Okay. And it's true, actually.
Yeah.
The valuation has changed significantly.
Yeah.
But the fundamental business never changes. And then after 2-3 years, the world is back. People are writing term sheets, funding, etc. And then, like you said, the last 10 years, all the exuberance, luckily human memory is short.
Yeah.
But so therefore, as a simple message on entrepreneurs, don't be dissuaded.
Yeah.
Look, this is just a cycle. If you are in the entrepreneurial journey for the right reasons, you have nothing to worry. If not, reassess.
No, perfect advice. And I think reassess is also a good thing. I feel a little bit of what you related from the Travel Guru experience is something an entrepreneur has to checkpoint every year or 2 years and see, are they in it for the right reasons? And I tell my founders, all exits are good exits because they are for a sort of a recycling of that entrepreneurial energy en masse, whether that's capital, whether that's people, whether that's founders. And all of them can't be widely celebrated, but it's Schumpeterianism at its best. It's creative destruction at its best.
And sometimes, like you said, Karthik, I think you're alluding to this, sometimes it's better to let go than cling on to a sinking ship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And had I continued to build Travel, like many of my peer companies, even after 10 years, or I think it's been 12 years, are kind of where they were 10 years ago because the travel industry has been impacted, etc.
Yeah.
If I look at my opportunity cost or how my outcomes have turned, it's better that I actually sold at that time.
Yeah.
And started something else. Of course, at that time, I didn't know.
Of course you won't.
That's the box 3.
Correct.
When you start your box 3, you don't know how it's going to turn out, but it was good I made that decision. In hindsight, it's actually very, very good I made that decision.
Yeah.
But at some stage in the future, I'm going to have that same choice to make.
Yeah.
What's my next box 3, right? And so clinging on is something that, and especially in times like this, it's a good time to assess, right? Am I better off continuing to run this? If you have the conviction, absolutely go for it. Because entrepreneurship is also about climbing mountains. The first time you see a mountain, you can't, put your tail between your legs and run the other way. That's not entrepreneurship. But at the same time, it's confronting reality. Like, okay, maybe this startup has achieved what it can.
Yeah.
Maybe it's better in somebody else's hands, and maybe the customers and whatever I'm building is better there. So let me sell and find something else, right?
Yeah.
These are very personal choices. And that's why I think sometimes investors, board members can help an entrepreneur be objective, because it's an entrepreneur, it's tough to be objective, right? Like it'll be too much if I say it's your baby, it's not, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't sell your baby.
Yeah.
But it is kind of something you invested so much thought, time, effort into that it's very tough to say, oh, I'm getting rid of it. And maybe in this environment, not even get the valuation you imagined you will get last year. That's why I think investors, board members, advisors can be helpful. But look, some companies will be better off. Some founders will be better off. Maybe thinking about that as well.
No, I agree with you. I think a lot of heavy duty advice and deep advice, wisdom of the failure, as you said, reflected in your courage in 10 years later. So this was fantastic. Kind of almost wrapping up here, we have a fun rapid fire section that I would love for you to give whatever answer comes to your mind first. Before I start, like the regular rapid fire questions we've listed out for you, maybe some Chennai trivia. Are you a Elliot's Beach guy or a Marina Beach guy?
A Marina Beach guy.
Okay, and a favorite sport in Chennai that you played?
Cricket. Actually got to playing for my city, so Chennai.
Oh, is it?
But way, many years ago.
No, it's still that's
junior.
But KFI was not known for like sending out too many sports persons.
Correct. No,
Okay.
in fact, KFI, the Krishnamurti system didn't believe in competition.
So
I used to play for a club called YMCA.
yeah.
That was allowed to play for...
In Nandanam?
In Nandanam,
Okay,
yes.
one more common connection. That's where I learned all my tennis. Not at
Really?
Yeah, at TTT. So back in
Fascinating.
the day. Yeah. Anyways, so no, wonderful to always meet someone from Chennai, especially back in the day. So great to share those experiences. So quick rapid fire stuff, just fun questions. You ready for them?
Yeah.
Okay. What would you order for your last ever meal?
So I would, if it's knowing that it's my last meal, I'll just fast. And let me give you a Chennai line, Rajnikant line. Yen vali tani vadi.
Yeah, that is one Rajni.
You didn't expect that, did you?
I didn't expect both.
Exactly the point.
But if you have a Rajni line for every rapid fire question, then you'll have a new cult following for yourself. And challenge the big boss, Mr. Matrabhutam, who's like now the Rajni startup fan of the country. So current book or favorite book of all time, and of course, if you want to add a line on why so, that
Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhamsa Yogananda. Changed my life.
Deeply spiritual. Now I have to go back to that. I haven't read anything like that in a while now.
But by reading, you don't become spiritual. You have to practice.
No, that's...
So you have to read and practice.
I need to know the lessons taught there is what I meant. Best piece of advice you've gotten?
Okay, it's Shlok from the Bhaja Govindam by Adi Shankaracharya.
Okay.
So intense.
Ah.
Kate kanta dhanagata chinta bhatula kim tava nastini cheta iha sansare bahu dushkare kripaya paro pahi murare.
Okay.
Did you understand?
Not at all.
Oh my God.
You have to add
so,
a minute to the...
Kate kanta dhanagata chinta. Why are you worried about dhana, which is wealth, fame,
Just
all
of
of
every
that?
line I've picked up.
Bhatula kim, in the end, nastini cheta. None of that exists.
Correct.
Very good for entrepreneurship. Why don't start thinking about the money? Focus on the path and the passion.
Yeah.
And of course, the second line says that think about Pahi Murare, which is whatever God you believe in. Because ultimately, that's the only one that endures from beginning to end.
Yeah.
The kind of the metaphor for entrepreneurship is, like I said, right? Think about what you're trying to achieve. The more nobler and higher cause of entrepreneurship, solving problems versus the end result. Because that will not last.
Fantastic. You have a piece of Rajni advice also?
No Rajni advice for this.
Okay. And favorite failure or most valuable learning? I mean, of course, you have the entire journey of the first startup, but beyond that.
So I think, look, I mentioned this, when the Expedia deal for Travel Guru fell apart, we had 2 months of cash. I had to let go of people. There is this notion of self, situation, and style. My self is to be a very likable person, conforming.
Yeah.
And so situations where I have to hire people, promote people, I do extremely well because everybody likes you.
Correct.
But a situation like this was kind of atypical to me. And we learn the most when your self and your style doesn't align with the situation. And so they're actually having tough conversations with investors, trying to manage the team that knew what happened, etc. It was horrible. But I learned a lot. And hopefully those same mistakes have not repeated in Eruditus. And I say hopefully because I'm sure some have.
But still a fantastic way to, again, put yourself in those situations. And I feel like a lot of us in the team have gone through some sort of a coaching experience now, especially leadership. And what I've realized is the sum total of that is to expose you to those circumstances so that you start to learn a little bit more about getting out of your comfort zone. So I can relate to it very much. I need to do it more myself as well. Note to self. Most memorable customer moment of feedback. I mean, that's what we all come to work for. So
I'll give you Yen Wali, Tani Wali answer.
Yeah.
So you said customer feedback. So there was a student who called me about a few months back. Not student, a prospective student. And he said, Ashwin, I want to thank you. I said, for what? You took one of our courses and helped you. He said, no. I called you and I said I want to take a course. You spent half an hour understanding my motivations. And you actually told me you don't need a course. What you need is coaching. And we don't offer that. And you gave me some names of some people who do that. That was the best advice. I respect you and your company so much because you didn't sell me something, but you helped me.
Yeah.
To me, Karthik, that is what education is about. That is who I am. And therefore, the most memorable, non-customer, but still feedback.
Fantastic. That high note. Thank you. Thank you again, Ashwin, for taking the time, and it was an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Can I say something? First of all, thank you. But the bigger thanks for what you do.
Yeah.
In our Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem, and I've seen this, 2005 when I was trying to raise capital, there were only 2-3 funds that would write your first check.
Yeah.
Right? 2010, same situation, 2015, 16, when we were looking at it on, the 2-3 became 10.
Yeah.
So what you and Blume are doing together in building that ecosystem, everybody wants the unicorn, but who's going to fund that guy when he's just an idea, maybe not even a website, not even an app?
Yeah.
Right. So thank you for building that ecosystem.
No,
because I think if we want this unicorn saga to continue and become, I don't know, from 100 to 500 or whatever it is in the next future, we need more people like you and more funds like Blume.
Well, thanks again, Ashwin. Words of encouragement from any founder is like a feed for us to continue pushing the envelope in every way we can, in our humble way. And a lot of young VCs now emerging on the scene and looking up to us for that mentorship and trying to traverse that same journey we started from 2011. So that's been very satisfying when they come back and say, we were inspired by your journey. I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs say that to you. And hopefully, we live in a country of various types of unicorns, not necessarily the shiny white ones with horns. And that was the theme of this podcast as well. So you clearly exemplify a lot of those characteristics. So we were glad to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for checking out X Unicorns. This podcast is a Blume Ventures offering, and we will be releasing a new episode every Tuesday. Our sound engineer is Shrey Tiwari, and our producer is Vedant Nayak of Manic Pod Studios. See you all on the next one. Cheers.